Ashy, and today I'm going to show you how I painted this open gate in acrylic. So I love fall landscapes and I'm always really drawn to them. If you have any favorite subjects, let me know down in the comments. I'd love to hear. Okay, I thought I'd start off by showing you just the paints that I use. So this is all pretty much student grade paints. I do have black Winsor & Newton acrylic paint. All the rest are student grade, just a mix of different brands of paints. And I have green, though I mix most of my greens, blue, cadmium red, and primary red. This is much more orange. And then a couple yellows, gold, white, and black. And that's all I have. And I'll add them to my palette as I go. Then in addition to the paints, I have a bunch of different brushes. The 2-inch flat wash I'm for sure going to use. I like to do like an underpainting with that. And then I'll definitely be using this fan brush. I like using a fan brush to create textures, for foliage especially. And then I have a couple of different flat brushes. Again, these are not fantastic, nice brushes, but they hold up nicely to acrylic paint. So a couple different sizes of flat, and then a few round sizes. I may or may not use these all, I don't know, but I just wanted to show you that I just have a mix of different brands of brushes. The biggest thing is that a flat wash brush is very helpful, and a fan brush, and then the flat and the rounds to create different shapes in the painting. And then I have a palette knife to mix my paints on the palette, and I can add paint to the canvas with the palette knife as well. And then water, towels. That's pretty much it. So I'm going to start with a light sketch of what I'm going to draw. And I found a reference photo on Pinterest that I really liked. So I'm going to use this picture as my reference. And so to start with, I'm just going to take a pencil, and this can be pretty heavy because the background of this is all going to be black because it's like you're in the building and it's silhouetted. So I'm just going to come up the sides where the frame would be. Okay. And then I'm going to make a nice arch up, and I want this to go higher on the page than in the picture, or the canvas. And then I'm just gonna arch that around. And if you want a perfect arch, you can get something like a bowl or something to draw, to trace, and then you'll get a perfect rounded arch. Now, just gonna kind of clean that up slightly. And I'm gonna use my kneaded eraser and rub out some of that extra line just so that I know which one to follow. Now, it's not a big deal if there's a line there because acrylic paint is opaque, so we're gonna be going right over it anyway. And then especially the door frame, which is dark, so it's not that big of a deal at all. Okay, now to generally kind of sketch in the path, the horizon line is going to be about here. So I want to keep that in mind. And I'm going to draw the path kind of coming in a curve out toward here. And then it's curving around that way. So then this one is coming out in a curve as well, different angle, and coming into this spot. Okay. And then here, kind of at the end of the path, there's going to be a figure. And I might put 2, we'll see, but there's at least one figure here on the path. Okay. And so I basically draw like a rectangle and then add an arm and like a shoulder on the other side, and then a line to separate the legs. And it's small and loose, so you're not really gonna see more of the figure than that. And then there's a bunch of trees in the background, which I'm not gonna draw. I'll just get them in with paint when I get there. But just to kind of get a rough idea of where some of them will be, I'm just gonna draw a few lines like representing the trunks. And as they get farther back, they're gonna get lighter in value and they're gonna get shorter. Okay, so something along that lines. And then there's more kind of back in here. And then on this side, there's some closer ones that go all the way through the painting. Okay, so generally that will be our painting, and then in front of this, I'll use acrylic to do the details of the door, or the gate. I guess it's not a door, it's a gate. And so I'm just gonna draw this straight line across. And same as with the arch, if you're concerned about your straight line being straight, obviously use like a straight edge, like a ruler or something to get that straight line. And then right in the middle, I'm just gonna do, so I'm just gonna add a few of these details now to the door, or to the gate. Okay, so just an arch there, straight beneath that one. And then there's another arch coming around that. So just kind of judging that distance and making it the same all the way around. Okay. If you had a compass or something, you could use a compass for this, because you would just choose the same spot and then go in for each of these arches, you know, start to close that compass down a little bit. I don't have a compass though, so I'm just freehanding it. It's fine. So that one got a little wider on this side. Just erase that. I want it to come to more like here. There we go. Okay, there's my arches. And then there's a bunch of kind of finicky details in there that we'll get to later. And then straight down from the middle, there's another straight line. Where the gate is closed on one side. That should be plenty for the drawing. More than enough, probably. It's gonna get covered anyway. And now I'm gonna go in with my lightest wash and kind of what I want the undertone of this painting to be, which for this one, I'm gonna do like a golden yellow. So I have yellow and yellow ochre that I'm gonna add to my palette. And I like to add a little bit of gold, just getting that kind of shimmery undertone is, I don't know, I just like it. So add a little bit of gold as well. And then I just use water to thin my acrylics. If you're concerned about the integrity of your painting, you can use a thinning medium, but I will tell you from what I've found in research, and I have a video on it, thinning acrylic paints with water is pretty fine. It's not really gonna ruin the integrity of the paint. And I reference a website that did a whole study on their paints and seeing how they reacted when they added water and versus a medium. Okay, so then I just go over the entire canvas with a very, very loose wash of my gold, and I cover my edges as well. And because it's so thinned, it's very transparent, but it's just gonna add a tint to it that when you start painting on top of it, if there's any like of that texture that shows through some of that tooth of the canvas that doesn't quite capture the paint that you put on top of it, instead of being white, it's gonna be gold shining through, which I like. And then this is just a 8x10 pre-stretched canvas, Crafter Square. I honestly think I got this at the dollar store. It's not an expensive canvas. So now that I just have a nice even wash of that gold, I let that dry, and then I start layering on my other colors. Right, so now when I start adding my other colors, so that I'm just going to add some yellow, I think about the areas that I want to preserve the lightness, because I can't lift up the acrylic paint after it dries. So I know that I want there to be some brightness like here that he's walking into, and then there's the yellow kind of the sky coming in. And I'm just going to get some very loose yellow paint there. And then I'm just going to use a smaller round brush to kind of blend that out where I want it. So when it's still wet, you can move it around and blend it and manipulate it. But once it dries, acrylic paint is permanent and it won't lift up anymore. So I didn't quite let the gold dry here, so I'm kind of blending some of this yellow in with the gold and lifting a little bit of that gold at the same time in this spot that I want it to be kind of the brightest. And then just kind of blending out the edges of my gold, or my yellow, I mean. And while I'm doing this, it's creating a little bit of texture in the sky that I'll use to, it'll kind of look like some soft clouds. Okay. Okay, so now I need to start mixing up some pale, low intensity greens. So I will grab a little bit of my green here and add it, and then grab a little bit of blue as well. And then I just want to mix some greens here. So I'm going to take just some yellow and a little bit of the green and a little bit of yellow ochre to mute it down a little bit so that it's not such a vibrant green. Okay, so mixing the yellow ochre with it tones it down a bit. And then I'm going to grab some red as well. And the red will, if I mix red with the green, it will also mute it because they're opposites. Red and green are contrasting colors, so it will make it a little bit less intense. If I mix equal parts, it'll make brown. If I mix just a tiny bit of the red in, it'll mute the green. Now for this color, I'm putting a lot of water in with it so that it's a nice thin paint, nice thin wash, so that it's a light value. And again, I'm going to kind of start the lightest, but also at the back and work my way forward. So I'm going to start defining this area of the path. See, it's still too vivid of a green, so I'm going to put in more red to tone it down even more. Okay, that's better. And I'm just starting by building some of these areas around, again, making sure that I'm preserving the bright areas that I want to maintain, but getting just a little bit of texture in back here. Okay, and then as I work away from that, where I know it's going to be mostly darker, I can add more concentrated paint and not be as careful and just get texture basically with that. And most of that's going to be covered with tree trunks and darker values. So just adding this as kind of a first, just to create the depth in the painting. And then again, as I come back toward the parts where I want it to be more preserved brightness, just use a lighter touch. And then the same thing kind of on the other side here. So I'm going to start down here where my figure is going to go and build up a little bit of that like glowing green color and work its way up. Now I'm just going to take some water and kind of blend this edge a little bit and make it softer as it goes up into this area that has less intense foliage. So I'm gonna go ahead and take my fan brush now, get water on the brush and just a tiny bit of that same color of paint, but very, very light and thin paint, and just tap that in again to create just a little bit more texture coming out from the trees. So I'm already liking the center part of this, so now I just have to start building up the other areas. So the path is covered in more fallen leaves, so I'm just going to mix up an orange here with yellow ochre and red, and then do the same thing with adding water to it and starting with a nice thin paint just to get some of that color in. And if it's too vibrant of a red or orange, I can add just a little bit of green or a little bit of blue to tone it down. And then for this, I'm going to go ahead and just block in this shape of the path with the orange. And then I can always go over it with some lighter colors for highlight if I need to. But this will kind of give me my barriers. So that's something to note too in the background. If I had gone more aggressive with the colors, you can always go back over it and lighten it up, but then you do get like a thickness to it. It doesn't quite have the same quality, and so I like to preserve the light areas if I can. It's not necessary when you're painting in acrylic though, like it is when you're using watercolor. Okay, so I just cleaned off my brush, and then I'm gonna lift up some of that paint that I put in the back here. Again, just where I want it to be kind of a glowier look, like the light's reflecting off of the path there. So I just want to keep that kind of like freshness in the color. So I'm just going to create some brown here by mixing green and red. Now that green is really blue, so that just made purple. So I need to add a little bit more yellow because that green is so blue. And then I get a nice rich brown, and I'm just gonna add a little bit of yellow ochre to it to lighten it up. And then I'm just gonna take a little bit of this brown and start to add it into the path where the tire marks would be. And this path is gonna be covered in fallen leaves, so these tire marks are not gonna be super visible because I'll put some leaves and fallen foliage on top of it. But this just gets the hint of that little like ruts in the ground where that would be. Okay, so now I can come back in and start adding some small tree trunks in the back where they would be kind of underneath other stuff, and a very light value, especially these ones that come kind of into this glowy space. They just are barely there. And so I'm just taking a round brush and using very light pressure with a very thin version of this brown paint that I mixed for the path, and just touching where I want to put these trees, and just adding in branches that come out kind of over the path, and just being loose and organic with it, just letting my hand kind of do what it wants to with it after I get that straight line up from the ground. And then as I come toward the front, they can get a little bit darker. Trying to keep the branches on the top as thin as possible with just the lightest touch. And they can be interrupted lines. They don't have to be connected because maybe there's reflections where you can't see it, or the foliage is in front of the branch, or you know, whatever. It just doesn't have to be all connected. And then again, like as we're coming more forward in the painting, the value gets deeper, and that can help create depth. So you can tell like this tree it looks closer to us because it's where it's placed on the page and using the different values. So even coming out here into the space that's more glowy, I'm using a darker value. And then just basically do the same thing on the other side, but with the way that it's curved around, we're seeing the trees that are closer to us more than the trees that are farther in the background. So these are going to be kind of a bolder look, plus it doesn't have the light reflecting on it like it does on the other side. So these ones are much more intense, and I'll go in and make these darker later too. I just want some that go kind of straight up through the whole thing. They can have some branches coming off. Okay, so then to mix up some darker brown again, just take my yellow and red and green. I don't know why I'm using this tiny brush to do this, but that's okay. Just use whatever's in my hand usually. And then I just added a touch of blue to make it like a cooler brown instead of a warmer brown. And then I'm going to take some of that and just kind of darken up some of these trees that I did in the front here. I don't have to do it on the whole tree trunk. I can leave some areas lighter and then add darkness to other areas to create some depth and kind of contrast with it. So I'm just going to switch to a smaller round brush for some of these thinner branches up here where I just feel like I need to have a lighter touch with it, and that round brush that I was using on the other one just had too thick of a point when I'm using a thicker and darker paint. I feel like I did okay with it to make these really fine lines with the watery paint, but not with this thicker paint. And then just kind of having a wobbly hand here is beneficial to create these organic tree branch shapes. You don't want to have too steady of a hand to create these straight lines. And then just kind of do the same thing over here on some of these darker trees. But on these ones, there's going to be more light hitting them, especially on the left side or the front side. So I'm just kind of thinking about adding the darker color to the right side of the branches just to create that look of the shadow and just contrast. And I'm not going to add it to all of them. As I get farther back, I'm going to be more sparse with it. But again, on these ones that are closest to us, I want to have the deepest colors, and that brings it toward us. So then this one, it's still, you know, kind of close to us, but not as close as the other one. So I'm just going to do a little bit less, lighter touch, a little bit less of the color, can water it down just slightly also, so that it's a little bit less or a lighter value, but still just creating a little bit of depth to the branches. And same thing as I go back farther, just using a lighter touch and just kind of define the bottoms of some of these ones in the back a little bit more. And I think that that looks pretty good. These ones on the left, I'm going to make a little bit darker. So I'm adding kind of a purpley brown to them just to create even more depth here. All right, now I'm gonna start adding some foliage to the path. And so I'm just gonna start with like a yellowy color, watered down a little bit. And I'm gonna use my fan brush for this. And I just like it because it creates such an easy texture to it. So if I just tap with the tip of the fan brush, it just creates a texture, and it's nice and easy. So I'm using a nice thin paint in the back here. Again, just work on maintaining that like glowiness, and then as I work my way forward, I can get a thicker paint and put it on more liberally. So that's just creating a little bit of texture there on the path and some contrast in the colors, and then I'll paint in some more details in terms of the foliage after that dries. And then I'm going to get in now to some of the deeper foliage here. So I'm just going to take some of this green that I already had and start building that up. Again, using that fan brush still. So I'm just creating depth with some low lights with some greenish brown here. And this whole like corner here is in the shadow, so that's mostly darkness. And then as we come up toward the path and around a little bit, we're getting this brighter colors. And then kind of the same thing is going on this side, where it's all kind of shadowed and hidden from the light here. And then as we start to come around, we get more of the light showing or hitting the foliage, and so it gets to be a brighter green color. I'm just going to add, kind of dry brushing now, letting that paint run out on my brush and just pulling it up into this more, just to create that connection between the colors. And then I'm just going to kind of use that same dry brushing technique to kind of add a little bit of depth to the greens up here. Don't want to add a lot, just a tiny bit of variation. Now I'm going to add just a little bit of orange to some areas, just to pull out those colors, and then just some into this kind of hillside here, coming down onto the path, and that's going to kind of pull that together and make it look connected and more realistic. And then kind of the same thing over here, just adding some of those colors down here next to the path. I haven't put anything in yet, really. So adding some greens, some oranges, and just kind of connecting those colors, blending them a little bit. Now I need to add some leaves that are more defined. So I'm just gonna take a round brush and add some like maple leaves here. And some of them are gonna be more abstract than others, but they need to be fairly opaque to cover the layers that were underneath, so not really thinning out the paint much, and they can have a little bit of texture. Okay, so I'm just kind of touching here and there, adding where I feel like a little pop of color would be helpful or beneficial or just look nice. Also kind of using the reference photo as a guide, but very loosely using the reference photo. And then some of the ones that are smaller or farther back, I'm really just kind of tapping the brush and just letting whatever mark happen. And then the ones that are more defined, I'm kind of drawing in that shape of the maple leaf. So I'm gonna do another one here that looks more defined. And so just kind of getting those 3 points out there and then filling in between them, and tap in different variations of the orange colors. And then I want to kind of do that same thing on the path to get just a little bit more definition to some of these areas to make it look like actual leaves instead of just an orange path. And this is just more about creating textures than shapes because it blends in so much in terms of the color, but the texture is going to make it kind of stand out a little bit. And so I don't want to do it over the whole thing because then that kind of defeats the purpose and you wouldn't see the texture as much. But certain areas kind of add that tap. And then as I work my way back, still doing the tapping, still creating texture, but getting smaller and less defined, kind of flatter on how I'm holding my brush, and just kind of putting little blobs of paint in various colors. Whatever my brush touches is what I'm going with. And I'm just going to add in a little bit more brown, kind of touching it in just to get that depth back, that darkness. Okay, so now I'm just getting some black and I'm gonna paint the figure in, and I have it already drawn here, so I just have to paint it in. And that was just like a rectangle, kind of a soft rectangle, not a perfectly straight rectangle. And then just separate the bottom half of the rectangle just slightly to create legs. Give that rectangle another little shoulder. And a little round head. And then I kind of want him to be walking a little dog. So there's the little leash. We'll see how this goes. Spur of the moment decisions. Sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't. So we'll see. So here's the little dog. And it's going around the corner already, so you can't see much of it. But you see its little tail sticking up. Back leg. Okay. All right, there he is, the little figure. Not bad. Okay, now I'm gonna come in with this larger, medium, flat brush, flat wash, and go ahead and paint in my gate here. So again, just following what I had already drawn. And then this part is just kind of filling in the background here, kind of the simple part here. And I'll paint the edges as well in just black, which I'll kind of go back and clean up after. And then I'm just going to turn it over to paint this side so that I get that. It's just easier to paint down toward me instead of painting up in that straight line. Okay, Okay, now I'm going to take my small flat brush and do some of the details here, or all of the details for the door. So got to start with this line straight across the middle. And then I'm just going to fill in this little archway above. Go ahead and pull this center line down. And the bottom of that gate is there. And then we have more lines coming down. And I am trying to make it as straight as possible, but I am freehanding it as well, so it's not super straight. And then the door here on this side is open. So we have this coming across for the bottom part of the gate, and then the door comes down. And then there's on the door some details. And then on the other side, we have the same idea, except the door is closed. So we have down from this arch, basically, a straight line. And then down from the next arch, another line. And a third. Okay, I'm going to switch to the round brush to do the arches, and I'm just going to try to go as lightly as I can. Using like a consistent pressure too is the goal. And I didn't do awesome with that with my straight lines. Okay, and then there's a thinner line in between the top one and the top of the arch. And then down from where that one is, there would be a line, and that's behind that door that's open. Okay. Now to create some of those extra details. So I'm going to start with painting in just some radiating lines from here. I think I'm just going to do 3 each direction. And then those continue out to the next arch. And I'm going to do one coming straight up the middle. Now these arch around and meet at the center point between the two of them. And then the same thing from the other ones. So it's like every other one arches up and meets with the other. Okay, and then there's just lines up. These lines just kind of, not from there, but from here, they continue up. Okay. And from each spot where the meeting arches meets, do a line. Okay. And then there's like little X's through here. And I'm just going based off the reference photo for this, but like loosely based. It's not gonna look exactly like the reference photo, but for the design, I'm kind of getting in the similar shapes as what it has in the reference photo. Now to add some detail to the doors here. There's another line coming across here, and then another one coming across the bottom. And then down here, there's some extra little bars. And then in the middle of them, there's some sort of little like mandala or something. And I'm assuming that there's something that connects that to the rest of the gate, but you can't really see it in the photograph. So I'm just gonna lightly make a little diamond here to hint at that connection. And then kind of the same idea up here. There's some extra little details. So just drawing in some diamonds now around these connection points. And then there's like little X's where they all connect. Okay. And then over here on the door on this side, there's the same thing. Okay. And then kind of some connection points here. Okay. Here, there's kind of a bunch of stuff going on, but I think that if I keep adding stuff up there, it's just gonna make it look too busy. So I'm gonna leave that how it is. And I think that that might be good. So now I'm just looking at the painting overall and seeing if there's anything that I feel needs added anywhere to make it make more sense or to make it look more refined. So this is where to take a step back and look at it. I'm just gonna add a little bit more black to some areas where it's not quite opaque, and it's gonna make it look shiny, but then once it dries again, it'll blend right in. Right here, I just wanna make this arch a little bit more subtle because it like still went up and then in, whereas this side just came straight around. So just fix that there. And that line there was a mistake. So I'm gonna take my fan brush and take some of the brown, or remix some of the brown. I don't know that I'm gonna get the same color here, so I might just leave it. So if I can't get the same color of green, it's gonna look like a mistake or an afterthought. Oh, that's pretty good. So I'm just gonna cover up that mistake. All right, there we go. So here is the finished painting. It took me just under 2 hours to complete, and I was really happy with the results. I'd love to hear your feedback, so let me know what you think in the comments. And as always, check out my channel for more painting content and have an awesome day.